Today I'm going to be talking to you about how psychology is a God-valued field of a career. What I'd like to show you first is, let's pretend that this is a man. And these are the cares of life that you might have. There's addictions, there's family problems, there's children problems. Maybe your job is having a lot of stress. Maybe you have some addictions. Maybe there's abuse in your family. Maybe you have financial problems. And all these things come together inside of you, and these cause problems. And so, what do you do? How do you do that? Well, as Christians, we know that we go to God. Galatians 6:2 tells us that we should encourage one another, bear one another's burdens, and do good to one another, to all people. For 30 years, I was a pastor's wife, and during that time, I filled many roles, but one of the main things that I did was people would come to me with their problems. And sometimes I had solutions, sometimes I didn't, and by the grace of God, we made it through. But the experiences that I had helped me to develop a desire to become or to be more interested in psychology and how that affects people and how can you help people through Christian counseling. So today I'm going to talk to you about Christian counseling is an integrated field that covers both psychology and theology, and it can be a platform for promoting what God values. Three things I'd like to cover are: I will define the role of a Christian counselor, I will point out how God values this work, and I'll discuss a few of the processes and techniques that a Christian counselor uses. First, let's look at the role of a Christian counselor. Christian counselors come from one of three sources. They come from secular psychology, the ministry, or the laity. Laity is all of you. A licensed Christian counselor must know the basic theories and techniques of secular psychology and psychopathy. But his worldview is biblically based, and he works with his clients from the biblical viewpoint. Dr. Timothy Clinton and George Oslager, in their 2002 book, Competent Christian Counseling, say, Christ-centered soul care means recognizing that the church, more than the hospital or clinic, is the central place for healing, growth, and rich relationship. So the role of a Christian counselor is to guide his clients toward stronger understanding and faith in God. Secondly, how does God value the work of a Christian counselor? The Christian counselor communicates the love of God through redemptive communication. Donald Alban Jr. describes this in his 2012 book, Speech Communication. He says, God values communication that manifests an authentic love for Him, a love that shows itself not only through God-centeredness in our stated attitudes, values, and beliefs, but also through our actions. God's values don't change. He's constant and unchanging. He's an all-powerful God. We're going to look at three of the values that God appreciates that affect psychology. First, God values our compassion for others. This includes rich and poor, old and young, everyone, anyone, in any walk of life should receive our compassion. God values sound reasoning that expresses truthful and righteous principles. A counselor uses scriptures and prayer and sound reasoning to guide his clients to recognize that God has righteous principles to live by. Thirdly, God values our attempts to communicate His gospel and forgiveness and redemption to those who do not know Him. The most important aspect of counseling an unbeliever is to guide him to the knowledge of Christ. Christian counseling is a therapy of hope building and helping clients realize that the root of the problem usually comes from a broken relationship with Christ. God places a lot of value on the help that a Christian counselor gives a client. And that brings me to my third point. What are some of the effective techniques that a Christian counselor might use? Well, here's Bob. Bob has been seeing a psychotherapist for 4 years to treat his fear of monsters under the bed. His progress has been very slow, and exhausted and frustrated, Bob decides to see a different psychologist. One day, several weeks later, Bob and the first doctor meet up. Bob is looking well-rested, energetic, and cheerful. The doctor says, Bob, you look great. What happened? Bob says, well, I went to see another doctor, and he cured me in one session. The doctor said, one session? How did he do that? Bob said, it was easy. He's told me to cut the legs off the bed. So a therapist can learn all he should. It's okay to laugh. The therapist should learn all he can about the client. And to prove that point, I'm going to show you with this little illustration. Okay, so the therapist should learn all he can through non-traditional processes and traditional processes. This is not going to work. Oh, here it goes. And he builds a trusting relationship. He uses good listening skills. He is non-judgmental. He encourages the client to join him in prayer. And he has guidance, and he helps him through the sessions.
Something's wrong.
And all these things come off, hopefully. Another technique that the counselor might ask is one of three questions. The scaling question, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you? The exception finding question, when you aren't experiencing these problems and the problem is less severe, what is happening? What is the exception? And thirdly, the miracle question. If you woke up in the morning and miraculously your problem had been solved, how would you know? What would the signs be that it was different? These questions help the counselor understand the expectations of the client, and it also gives the client a hope that he can be helped. There are many other techniques, but ultimately, if the client focuses on small, manageable steps, he'll begin to see big changes. Karen Lawrence and Stephen Greco summed it up in their article in the fall 2012 Journal of Christian Psychology, titled Clinical Appraisal of Spirituality. They said, counseling that strives to be intentionally Christian invites expectations beyond problem resolution. It inspires hope of faith enhancement and spiritual enrichment. Of course, there's much more to being a Christian counselor than what I've been able to talk to about in a limited time frame. A professor of psychology at a university knew his students expected a long final exam. So to play with their minds a little, he only gave them one question on the test. And he watched their reactions as they came into the classroom. They opened the test and they saw that there was just one question. Oh, they were so relieved. And then as he watched their excitement and happiness change to dismay, because as they read the question, they realized that it was much more complex than they had anticipated. Except for one student. One student looked at the question, thought for a second, wrote something down, got up, handed the paper to the professor, and walked out. The professor was really surprised, and so when he looked at what the student wrote, he smiled and wrote 100 on top of the paper. What was the question? The question was, what is courage? The student's answer, this is. So psychology is a fascinating field. Christian counseling brings a client closer to Christ, gives him hope for his future, and shows him that God's love is never failing. As a Christian counselor, whether you're getting rid of monsters under the bed or defining courage, you will be helping those who come to you to have a better life here on earth, and you will be building the kingdom of God. Thank you very much, and I hope you learned a little something about Christian counseling today.